Warning. This video is a work of entertainment, satire, commentary, or artistic expression, reflecting the personal opinions and creative vision of the creator, which do not reflect the opinions of YouTube, Google, its parent company, affiliates, or companies advertising on YouTube. This video and the content therein are protected by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution and Fair Use Principles, Title 17, U.S. Code, subsection 107. It is not intended to be factual professional advice or an endorsement of specific outcomes, including health, financial, or other claims. No results are guaranteed, as outcomes vary and are not typical. Viewers must independently verify all information and consult credible sources before acting. Any critique or discussion of political figures, candidates, or parties is intended as satirical or critical commentary, not to advocate for or against any election outcome in the United States or elsewhere, and is presented in accordance with YouTube's community guidelines, including EDSA. Educational, documentary, scientific, or artistic exceptions for transformative content. This video does not intend to spread misinformation, incite violence, promote hate speech, or harass individuals or groups. The creator reserves the right to appeal any platform restrictions, expecting YouTube to apply its policies consistently and transparently. Viewer discretion is strongly advised, as this content may include controversial or subjective viewpoints. Verify claims independently to avoid reliance on unverified information.
Hello again. Nonstop thoughts. Here thinking nonstop again. Wanted to talk to you all about a little something that's been on my mind for quite a while now. Is it just me, or is everything seem to be off somehow? Like we slipped off into some other sort of tangent of reality. Like time itself is not correct. And I know people will say, well, it's just because you're getting older. And, when you were in school, the summer seemed like it lasted forever. And, or maybe it didn't last long enough, depending on your perception. And that's what it's all about. I'm not talking about the perception of acceleration. I'm talking about time itself is off. Does anyone really remember anything distinct that separated 1 year from the next for the last 5 years, 5 to 6 years? Well, we all remember one thing that happened, right? And I'm going to get into that just a little bit. There towards the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020, something did happen. We all know what that was. And the more you sit around and think about it like I have, you're trying to keep away the bombardment of distraction, right, that's going on all around you, and everything you're seeing on your phone and on TV and hearing on the radio, if you still do that kind of thing. All the things that are trying to take away from your attention, which is important. Your attention is important, as well as intention. All those things are important. But something changed. And I think that those people, if you want to call them people, who are in control, or they think they're in control, they at least have a slice figured out that the rest of us are ignoring, and they're capitalizing on that. They know that consciousness creates reality. But it doesn't depend on just one person. It depends on everybody. Everybody has to be on the same page, or they have to be under the same intention, or their attention all has to be focused on all one thing. Their intention, their intentions, their actions, their thoughts, as well as their attention to that intention. So there's a distinction there too. When your computer has to be taken to a shop because you've picked something up, either by your own fault or not, and it catches something, we all know what that's called, right? Well, the same thing happens. They got that idea for that word from somewhere, right? From biology, from something that happens to all of us occasionally. Or they're from the end of 2019 to early 2020 happened to a vast majority of us, I would say probably 90% of people, all people, suffered with that release. You know, I don't know if you guys realize this or not, but when you get ill, your DNA changes to compensate for the environment, the new reality of your environment, so that you can continue to function the way you are, or the way you think you are, right? So your DNA is shaped a certain way. It's like a helix. Some other things are shaped that way too. Antennas are shaped that way. Sending and receiving signal. That's what your DNA does too. It both sends and receives signals from the rest of your body and the rest of everything else, all the other cells and chemicals and everything else it's responding to. So if, let's say, a certain group of people figured out that consciousness creates reality, and they programmed something and then released it on all of us, then that might be some explanation for why it feels like everything is off, why everything has changed. And you know what I'm talking about. You can't quite put your finger on it, but you know it's there. And of course, the name of that particular illness had a name. And if you know anything about certain religions dealing with the chakra system, the one at the very top that's separate from the rest of the body and the spirit is the crown chakra. Crown can also mean something else, or it can also mean be defined with another word, right? Has to do with the sun. So if they figured out a way to biologically change you and us, to manipulate spirituality through biology, things would feel off. And it's not necessarily that they need any sort of outside frequencies through your phone, through 5G, through satellite signals, through whatever everyone's being programmed to say, to take away from the actual attention of what actually happened. Each and every person now becomes a transmitter and receiver both for that new reality, that new way of life, that new dimension. And we're being bombarded with all kinds of things that take our attention away from that. I mean, by design, of course, by design. Now, I have been hearing some other things that are probably related, so bear with me. The merry-go-round will come back around, I promise, and it'll all apply. There's, I'm sure we've all probably heard of CERN by now, even though right up to about 15 or 20 years ago or so, less than that really, no one had heard of it, even though billions and billions of dollars were being poured into it by many, many different nations. And some of the scientists that were working there have quit and run away from it and are forever changed by what they saw, by what they witnessed. Entities and things floating through walls, and when the thing was kicked on, because they're like making a direct shift into reality, what can be seen, what can be sensed. And that probably has a little bit to do with it too. Maybe both of those things together. Maybe that's by design too. Every time they flip that bastard on now, everybody's reality changes because their DNA has been changed. And that's the main transmitter. We would be the receivers, and then each one of us, as we get pinged with that energy from that central source, then becomes a repeater of that signal. Let me ask you something. When's the last time that you heard anything about something like a crop circle? Now, this is going to sound like it's going off into the fringe, but again, it'll come back around. That was the early stages. Not by them. They didn't create the crop circles, and aliens didn't either. They want you to believe it was aliens because they want you so badly to believe in aliens. That way, any one person who has a deviation, sort of a consciousness, which is dangerous to them, they can then send you a signal. You in particular, you'll have some sort of traumatic experience with these beings. Your reality will be shifted as a result, and you'll be living a life of fear. Sometimes it's not grays. Sometimes it's, ghosts or whatever. And, of course, then they'll pump you full of medications because, you're supposed to be schizophrenic or whatever, or going through a psychotic break, which is why most people never even talk about it. Because deep down inside somewhere, they know that that's off and that wasn't really real, but man, everything about it seemed real. And they can't be told otherwise as a result. If they do speak about it, they know it was real. And here, and especially in here, they know it was real. But back to the crop circle thing. People think, they say, well, if it's not aliens, then what could it possibly be? If not some outside source doing these things. Well, I'll tell you what I think, and you tell me down in the comments if you think that I'm onto something or not. Or maybe you think I'm on something. Either way. It comes from the earth itself. Those patterns. Those perfectly geometric patterns. Well, what else runs on perfect geometry? The earth going around the sun is a perfect geometry. The moon going around the earth, perfect geometry. All the other bodies in the galaxy, in the solar system, perfect geometry. The flower you lean down to sniff or to look at, if you really look at it, there's perfect geometry in that. Almost seems like it's by design, right? So why would those crop circles be any different? It's just a form of communication that we don't really understand. For the longest time, humanity probably didn't know how flowers came about, or how bees make their perfect hexagonal shapes in their hives to produce the honey that they make. And we didn't understand all those things at some point. We just knew that they happened and we could observe them, but had no idea how they work. And really, for the most part, we still don't really know. We know the process, but we can't really explain fully why those things happen. We have, explanations like photosynthesis and, metamorphosis when it comes to things like butterflies. And we don't really, we're observing it with more words and we're explaining these things without actually explaining them. Crop circles are no different. We just know less about them than anything else. One, because they're a more rare occurrence, but two, because we have no fucking clue how it happens. So we blame aliens, right? It's got to be the aliens. Or maybe that's just what they want you to believe, because they don't want you looking any further into it. They don't want you looking any further into the geometry of it and the communication therein. At a certain point, that communication has to be for a reason. It has to have some sort of function. And there's points in time where we believe that there's things like the Nazca lines, where there's all different kinds of shapes that are out there. We believe those are man-made. We also believe the crop circles, for the most part, are man-made. If you really do your research, especially the complex ones, ain't no fucking way. especially because a lot of the reeds, the wheat or the corn or whatever it is, the shaft is bursted from the inside out from heat and laid over. Sometimes they're even woven together and braided, all in one direction, all making this perfect. There's no way some hillbilly jackasses in the middle of the night with wood and strings fucking did that. Not happening. Not happening. So what's the explanation then? Aliens. Can't be a natural occurrence. Can't be that the Nazca lines, that was back before we really, or at least at that point in human history, we weren't really farming, so there was another way of things happening, moving around, rocks shifting, sand moving around, that things were being portrayed for later generations to observe and go, maybe aliens. And then later on, we have crops. We have large crops, industrial size crops. And that was known that was going to happen. So, as a result, another form of communication. The crops are then laid down in perfect geometric patterns. And it was also known that at some point we were going to take to the skies. Or who knows, maybe it was for the birds before us. Maybe those signals were for other things that fly, not aliens. Maybe that's just a function. You never know. And we don't really know. But I know it's not fucking aliens. It's not aliens. Never was, never will be. They don't exist, except for whenever, like I said, they send you one of those fear signals to set you off inside and you're having a fucking bad LSD trip suddenly because they triggered the DMT in your pituitary gland or in your pineal gland. And they sent you some nasty frequencies that made you have a bad fucking trip. And by they, I do mean those who are in control, who have always been in control. Now, you want to call those aliens? Fine, but that's not what they are. But they are in control of this place for now. And maybe that's what the Earth is trying to tell us. Hey, silly monkeys, it's not aliens. It's been me all along. By design. Because life and nature and all those things came from something else as well. It wasn't just the Earth that created the Earth. Something interjected something into the Earth to create life itself. And there's something beyond the Earth and the communications that we get from the Earth. But we're getting further and further away from that because, unfortunately, those who are in control now are gaining a better and better understanding from those who were in control before, who are still here in a spiritual sense. And they're having their influences, those old gods, they're starting to bleed over into reality with the minds and the heart and the thought process of the people that are around today. They're obsessed with control and power. So they're teaching them things, teaching them their ways. And that's why everything feels off. Because it is. I've also heard some other strange things that the Earth's core might actually has stopped and we're just not aware of it yet. That the sun, like the farmers are starting to notice that the sun is like rising and setting in weird spots. And that the moon isn't acting quite right. And I don't mean just like sun dogs and in the perihelion and all that shit I'm talking about. It's rising at the wrong time and setting at the wrong time for this time of year. And these people pay attention to this. It's their living. People that grow sunflowers are saying that the sunflowers are no longer following the sun. Perhaps there's been some sort of cutoff from the soil because the earth has died and we're all living on a corpse and now we haven't realized it yet. That's a scary thought. I hope that's not the case. Could be any number of these things. Could be all of these things all at once. But I do know that we're coming up to something. And that's something else we can all feel, right? We all know that something's getting ready to go down. Something more than World War III. which again, we're all being distracted with that thought process, that fear mongering. All this shit is meant to put us in a state of fear. But if you can realize that, all of you out there can realize that, we might be able to rise above this and change our consciousness and change the reality we're living in. But so many people are locked up into it. And I don't talk about these things often because they sound woo, they sound crazy. But I know that they're true. I know there was going to be some other things that I was going to talk about, but I can't now remember them. Maybe that's because I'm subject to a bit of that control myself. But I'm doing the best I can to get that information out. There's a certain amount of difference between destiny and willpower. Each one of us has the ability to will ourselves through a situation. And everything happens for a reason, whether you will it into existence or not. It's just like me right now. I shouldn't even be making this video. I should be out there making deliveries, but had more problems with the tires now that they're on hold, they're on wait. So now I'm probably not going to get my tires on my car till tomorrow. So here we are. Everything happens for a reason. Maybe that's why I'm making this video. Perhaps the decision was already made for me to make this video. Or perhaps I wasn't supposed to be out there because I was going to have an accident, and that would have been the end of me, and no more videos, no more me, at least as far as I'm concerned. That's something else too. When you go to sleep at night and you wake up the next day, do you know that that's you? Where do you go when you go to sleep? You think you just go to sleep? You think that you physically or mentally or spiritually are the same person as the person that went to sleep the night before? How do you know? Well, I have Facebook posts and pictures and things that tell me that I'm the same person that I was yesterday. Okay. All right. Sure. That's my point. We have a very thin sliver of what we understand as reality. Unfortunately, there are some individuals, some groups of individuals that have figured that out and have had it figured out for a long time. And they're using everything they can to try to stay in control. And I believe that they believe that they're slipping, that they're losing their control. And so therefore, other little things are being released to us. Every time where our consciousness starts to rise in a spiritual way, we're dropped back down into a physical world by innovations, by discoveries, by things like computers, by things like social media, by things like AI. And that's the true intention of those things when they get released. When someone has the thought, then it gets brought into reality. And probably not for the better. Of course, there's the observer effect. Did you see that little thing float across there just a second ago? What was that? I didn't miss it, did you? There's the observer effect, where it's the belief, and I believe this is also true, that if nothing and no one is around to observe something, then it doesn't exist. At least temporarily, it doesn't exist. So if you have like a car and you park it somewhere, and there's nothing around to observe it or to experience it as a reality, it simply does not exist until someone comes along to see it, and then they can interact with it and not just, touch it or whatever, but just to see it makes it exist. And of course, in order to have made that car to begin with, a whole bunch of people had to have had the thoughts to put the damn thing together. and to have the forges to melt the metal to make the fucking steel for the vehicle and all the parts and everything that goes into it, of course, that's common sense that cars would not exist if no one had had the thought to make a car. That's common sense. What's not so common sense is that the car itself does not exist if no one's around to observe it. It's the whole, tree falls in the forest kind of a fucking thing. That's been an argument for thousands of years, that if we're not there to see it, it doesn't happen. Not just you, but also like birds and squirrels and bugs and worms. And if nothing is there living, even a tree, if a tree is next to it, that can have some interaction with it from the breeze, even the wind, if there's no wind there to interact with it, it doesn't exist. But that's a very small sliver of existence that does not exist, right? That's why so many things seem to exist, because we don't ever observe non-existence. There is only what exists to us because we exist, or at least we think we exist. So back to my original point, which is something's off. I don't know if it's planned, because we all do things whether we plan to or not. If you decide to eat something, have you already decided what you're going to eat before you have decided that you're going to eat? Is it your hunger that tells you that it's time to eat? Is it something in your mind? Is it your upbringing that predispositions you to bad foods that makes you fat? Or is it just because programming through your TV that tells you that the fucking Whopper is having it your way? Is it having it your way? Or is it having it their way? Or is it having it in some other way? Did you decide to eat today because you wanted to eat, or was that decision already pre-made for you? So something's off. So many people now are apathetic to everything that's going on. Now that could just be an overload situation. Or it could be very well that something down into their deep biology has been shifted, and they're being programmed to be different, and that they've been programmed to be different in not such a good way, but perhaps a profitable way. Thankfully, there has been pushback for those people out there that are of a spiritual nature or even a religious nature, depending on what religion it is. There has been pushback to this. There's mind, there's body, there's spirit. And if those three things are not in unison with each other, in harmony with each other, then you're living a hellish existence. And most of us now are living in a hellish existence because of that. But one of those three things can affect and will affect the other two. So if your mind process is in a good place, spiritually you will have a certain glow about you and you will be able to share that with others. Same thing goes with the negative. And physically it will have an effect on you as well. If you're mentally in a good place, everything down to your DNA processes, all the things that are churning out all the things that make you you and fighting off all the things that aren't you, will be in much better harmony, a much better, happier place, right? Pardon. I'm hoping that we can figure this out before they figure out how to completely use it all against all of us if they haven't already. Because if they make us all believe that the world's coming to an end, it may very well come to an end because of that. Does that make sense? So Just some food for thought, nonstop, from your buddy nonstop. And if you like this kind of content, this sort of a deeper dive, sort of introspective, but speaking outward with the introspection kind of content, this sort of longer form content, let me know down in the comments. And subscribe if you haven't already. And share it with your friends. Share it with your neighbors. Share it with your family. Share it with strangers. Get out there and share it. Because this thing right here that we're doing, even though it's an artificial version, could still be useful in a way of shifting the consciousness, shifting the way we think, and therefore shifting the reality. So help me shift this reality we're in to something better for all of us. Thank you, and you'll see me next time.